So what we're going to do tonight is we're actually going to talk about kind of uh, the hidden jobs. So you guys have probably heard that something like, anywhere from 70 to 80% of jobs are not posted on LinkedIn or on Resume Finder. So this is what's known as the hidden job market. So the question is, how do we go and how do we make the right connections that we need to make in order to have a chance to be able to have, ourselves known and reviewed by these people that are hiring for these hidden job markets. And really, it all comes down to making the right connections. So what I'd like is, I guess, David and Scott, if you're on the call here, maybe you can turn on your video. But I am kind of curious of where you guys are in the process. Is this something? Are you actively in a job search? Were you recently laid off? Need help finding a job, a new city, bored? So David, let's sort of start with you. Are any of these you, or what? Who are you? What brings you here tonight?
Yeah, so I'm in the middle of a job search. I left my prior job at the end of 2018 and decided I would take a year off just to, so I'd never done that before. And impeccable timing. I had started my job search about 2 months before the COVID-19 crisis hit. But, I had done some part-time searching and entertained a couple offers in the interim, but ironically, they all wanted me to relocate.
Yeah.
And I look at that with considerable irony right now, right? My argument back then was, well, these are, customer-facing positions, so I expect they'll be traveling or visiting customers, most of the time. So what difference does it make where I'm at? So it turns out I was kind of right, although for not the right reason. So I've entertained a couple different offers. I actually have a connection meeting tomorrow with the CEO who company I've been talking to even before I left my prior position. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I'm actually looking to get back into the swing of things. I've been, doing some consulting on the side, but Todd and Kevin know the story. But a guy from Amazon, a sales guy, reached out to me and asked me if he could interview me. And I thought, well, okay, what's the catch, right? Turns out there wasn't any. He was very passionate about leadership and people management, and seen some of my posts and read some of my stuff and wanted to interview me. So, okay. So we did, and that kind of relit the fire in me. It's like, yeah, I need to get back and get into a management of people development type of a position. So that's kind of stirred my interest and got me focused in that direction.
Yeah, going to be very interesting to see kind of how the remote workforce shakes out. Obviously, it is a new world. We are going to get out of this COVID thing, but without question, remote workforce is here to stay. And it'll be interesting to see how that, you need to move, you need to relocate. I think that's going to be more the exception than the rule than it was 6 months ago. So
yeah,
I think
definitely.
a lot of opportunities open up. Scott, what's your story? What brings you here tonight?
Yeah, I'd say of the listed items, it's probably closest to the last one. I was CTO and president at a startup. A couple of years ago, I left. It was a good time to get out, and I did. And I've kind of dabbled with looking for things since then, looked at a couple of CEO positions kind of around the country, and none of them were quite the right fit. Those probably come at me about one every 6 months, it seems. So I'm looking to find the right thing. I actually have a little experience with Amazon as well. I did. They had an high-level position there that I applied for a couple of months ago, and it didn't work out. But apparently the door was still open, but then kind of got ghosted by those guys. I have since started a consulting company and looking to build a consulting base in addition to finding a full-time gig.
What's interesting, I'll kind of intersperse this a little bit, but a lot of what I'm sharing is very applicable if you decide to go to the consultant route. So here's sort of the big idea. The big idea is you are now marketing. You're marketing yourselves for the next job, which really the only difference between a job search and a consulting gig is really if you're going to continue sort of the consulting, your marketing never ends. So a lot of stuff that we're going to talk about, you can really sort of just take this and just sort of continue it because it's very applicable for kind of a consulting marketing type of opportunity. So I'll kind of intersperse that a little bit. And, if you have any questions sort of on that, feel free to bring those into the conversation as well. So some of the questions that people have or some of the challenges are, you've been promoted internally, but you don't know how to do an external job search. So a lot of people kind of, it's been a while since they've been out in a job search. And that was sort of my career. So I had about 15, 20 years at Dell. And, a big part of my story was I took a severance offer from Dell. And it'd been a long time since I'd been on an external job search, and I was at a significantly different level because of Dell. And so it was kind of hard to get back into it. Number two is you're not a networker, and you just don't know how to build one. So maybe you don't consider yourself kind of a people person, kind of go-getter. You sort of think of this networking as, oh, well, that's a sales job type of an opportunity, and I'm an IT guy. And I don't know what it, networking is like this kind of ugly word, and I don't know what that means. On the flip side of that, you're someone that's like me, you're gregarious and you're outgoing, and sort of building a network is not difficult for you, but actually understanding how to get your network to help you. You haven't really sort of thought about, okay, I've got this, I've got lots of friends, I have family, I sort of have a personality that's got this, but I don't know what questions to ask. How do I get my network to help me? And really what it all kind of comes down to is a lot of people are just kind of overwhelmed and maybe a little scared. And certainly kind of the COVID-19, that definitely adds into this equation as well. So I always like to ask, how long should a job search last? And, if you look at Google, Google says that for every $10,000 that you plan to earn, it will take you a month. I frankly find that to be kind of ridiculous and quite a myth. What I do think a job search should last is really your job search should last 30 to 90 days. Now, I am going to put a little bit of a caveat on this. The real key, and we'll touch on some of these points, is if you can really articulate what your true north is. This sentence that I have right here, I solve X pain for Y organizations by doing Z. This right here is your true north. It really is the starting point for a job search. If you're not real clear on this, it's going to take you a little bit longer. I'm going to show how you can use this networking to help you find that true north, because some people kind of, they haven't thought about that. They're not really there. So, okay, how do I use this networking to sort of drive this statement? But you really need to get clear what's the pain that you solve, because the only reason that anyone hires you is because you solve some pain that they have. And the higher the value of the pain, the more expensive, the more that they will pay you. It's a real simple equation. I actually have the company that I work for is a healthcare technology company, and we're actually developing some healthcare screening kiosk related to COVID. Basically, we do some temperature checks and things of that nature. And it's very interesting because there really are kind of two types of customers, right? Everyone right now is COVID. It's a big deal. But we're already seeing that there are those customers that are, the barber shop, the restaurant, they know that eventually this is going to end, and some form of normalcy is going to eventually return. And they're kind of like, man, I don't want to pay, buy this multiple $1,000 scanning thing for my restaurant. I just don't see that need to it. Then on the other end of the spectrum, we have true healthcare organizations, example, assisted living facilities, exact same technology, exact same pain, much bigger problem for them. They know that regardless of what happens with COVID, flu and influenza and other things are going to be out there, and this is now kind of on their radar. So again, understand the pain that you solve and understanding what kind of organization you solve it for, okay, and how they value that pain for them, and then being real clear on what exactly it is that you do. What is it that you do to solve the pain for those particular types of organizations? So the sooner that you get focused and clear on your true north, I solve X pain for Y organizations by doing Z. I really do believe that you can get a job search done, a very successful job search done in 30 to 90 days. And don't worry if you're not clear on this. I'm going to show you some ways to use your networking to help answer this question. What does a job search cost? You've all done the math. If you have wives and you're in a little bit of stress, you probably know, you've probably done the calculation for yourself. So again, it's very important to recognize what that opportunity cost is of that delayed job search. So, every week that goes by is multiple thousands of dollars that's being left on the table for most of us. All right. So what does it mean to make the right connections? Well, really, there's 4 types of connections that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about direct contacts at targeted companies. We're going to talk about executive recruiters and sort of the difference between executive recruiters and other types of recruiters. We're going to talk about private equity leaders. Austin is known as being a entrepreneurial center. There's a lot of things that are related to that. And, maybe you have some opportunities to where a private equity leaders would really be appropriate for you. And then the 4th type is friends and families. How do we engage our friends and families with the job search? So I'm actually going to start with the friends and families. I would say that as much as anything else, these are the guys that can really help you define your true north. These are the guys that you've worked with, guys and gals that you've worked with. They can help remind you of what you've done. Here's the insight that I would give you. A lot of times we can talk to our friends, and if they're good friends, they're going to say, "Oh man, yeah, Todd, you're a great guy. I love you. You're wonderful." And I don't want to devalue that. In fact, if you've been in a job search for a while, we need to have, good friends that give us a pat on the back and kind of help us. But I really, when you're talking and maybe you're having a cup of coffee with a friend or a former coworker, I really want to challenge you to try to dig a little bit deeper and get a little bit more substantive into that. If they're a colleague that you've worked with, kind of remember some of the dragons that you slayed and the fires that you put out at your time, and use that to really, remember when we did this, because that's going to help you kind of identify the types of problems that you've solved. If this is more of a personal friend and maybe they've been outside of, or you haven't worked with them, really kind of dig in and help them help you by saying, how do you see me? What do you see as my calling, as we've known each other? I do believe that each of us have a God-given calling that we have. And a lot of times that's where our, those personal friends and those families can really kind of give us some insight into what has that really been? What has that What has your personality led you to? What are those things that, for decades maybe have been apart? So helping you really understand your calling. So use your friends to really help you find your true north. Now, once you have that, some tactical things to do with your friends is go ahead and ask them for LinkedIn recommendations. I'm going to show you in a little bit how to incorporate these into resumes and other things. But again, if these are your friends and their buddies, that's usually a very easy ask for them. And I would kind of remind you that a powerful recommendation is both, good guy and specific results. So again, especially for those colleagues that you've worked with, help them to kind of write the LinkedIn recommendation and help them to kind of remember those specific results so that they can say, yeah, I worked with Kevin at such and such, and, we did this project and, we saved the client $20 million or whatever it is. Make it real easy for them. Be respectful of their time, coffee and lunch if appropriate. But a focused 30-minute phone call can be very powerful. But again, this is, one of those things, respect their time, respect what they're giving you, make it easy for them to help you. For the other four, for the direct contacts, the executive recruiters, and the private equity leaders, what we're really going to be doing with these guys is we're going to be developing a strategy to build top of mind awareness. So this is very much a marketing strategy. And again, if you're going to be in consulting for a while, you can really just sort of use this process and just continue it as part of your marketing process to build top of mind awareness. So what do I mean by that? What I mean is you're going to identify specific contacts at specific companies, and you're going to have a multi-touch strategy to them. So you're going to send them an introduction letter. And I do, by the way, recommend an actual letter in the mail, regardless of the company. Start with that. In your resume, you're never going to use a cover letter, but you are always going to attach a pain letter to your resume. Extremely important. Okay. Write out, I solve X pain for Y kind of organizations by doing Z. Okay. I think one of the most critical things that people, leave off the table is any kind of a correspondence. We get so tied into, I've got to get through the search bot, and I got to make sure all my search words, and that I forget that a human being ultimately is going to read this. And so make sure that you have that pain letter and resume as part of your outreach to them. And then you're going to phone. And by the way, I'm going to show you here in just a minute how you can actually find key contacts for your job search. You're going to phone them, you're going to email them, and you're going to LinkedIn connect with them. So this is going to be your 5 steps or your 5 contacts that you're going to make with them. Now, very quickly, we're going to talk about this introduction and this pain letter. This is a little bit of a bonus, okay? So what we have here is sort of a typical resume, and it looks kind of like every other resume that you've seen. By the way, I actually used to work for an executive recruiting firm, so I literally have looked at thousands of resumes. And unfortunately, most of them are very boring. They're very formatted like this. It's like reading a text sheet. Okay, now I don't know about you, but there's a reason why when Acura is making commercials for their new cars, they create this grand emotion, and they talk about you're going to get the girl, you're going to get all this stuff. They don't lead with a spec sheet on, the torque and all this other kind of stuff on their car. Now, what I did with this client is we actually took this resume and we turned it into something more like this. Same information was there, key information, but we made this into a marketing brochure. So what do I mean by that? Well, one, we actually created some color and some people, okay, some pictures in it. I really encourage you. There's a lot of people like, oh, I'm a middle-aged white guy. I don't want to show my picture. Again, this may be some of my faith coming into to the equation, but I firmly believe that God knew exactly who you were going to be. He knew exactly when you were going to be born. He knew exactly what age you're going to be right now. And he's not going, oh man, I forgot. John turns 50 this year and he needs a job. Oh man, I didn't figure that into the equation. He's now too old, and gosh, I didn't give him what he needed. So I encourage you, lead with who you are. This is going to be a big part of my story, or my advice or whatever, is be who you are. So Sam put in his picture. Remember I talked about having LinkedIn recommendations. So this lady here, Emma, was a former manager or owner or something where Sam worked. And guess what? This content came straight off of a LinkedIn recommendation that she did. So Sam incorporated those LinkedIn recommendations into the resume, included the content and included the picture from LinkedIn. Again, our minds are keyed to people, and especially when hiring, they want to see, who are you? Who recommended you? And that's a very powerful way that you can incorporate LinkedIn recommendations into your other marketing material, in this case, your resume. So again, this was kind of a bonus about resumes. Okay, so direct contacts at targeted companies. So what you want to do is you want to identify 30 to 40 specific companies that you're interested in. So these are your why organization. Is it a private company, public company? Is it healthcare, finance? The more narrow that you can be in that, you're not looking for 100, you're looking for 30 to 40 companies. Some helpful resources is bizjournals.com, and pretty much for each of the major cities, so Austin, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, Nashville, there's pretty much a specific city, austin.bizjournals.com. But if you just go to bizjournals, oops, I see there's a typo there. It's journals.com. You can actually get a sense of the types of companies that are in that city. And I'm going to show you something else. This is actually pretty cool. And this one is even during COVID. Oh, I don't have my card number. Well, guess what? If you go to the Pflugerville Public Library, and by the way, you can do this in the Austin Public Library, and if you're in any major city, you can go online, and almost all of them have this online database called A to Z database. And unfortunately, it looks like my credentials are no longer cached on this browser. But this A to Z database, I can literally type in Austin, healthcare, privately held, and I can come up with a digestible number of companies, less than 100 companies, who their CEO is, who their CEO is, in many cases, direct contact information. If not, doing a little bit of digging, and you can find out who those people are. So again, almost every major library has this A to Z database. In most cases, it's completely free, and it's a very powerful resource that you can use to identify specific companies. So use these resources. I would recommend that you aim high. Aim for the CEO, the COO, the chief HR officer. Now, yes, I'm going to be a little bit of a caveat. If you're aiming for Dell, look, if you want to send an email to Michael Dell, that's fine. His email address is michael@dell.com. You might get lucky and hit him up with something. But the point is, it's much better for you to aim high and have them redirect you to somebody else than to frankly aim too low, and that person either A, isn't in a broad enough area to where they can see the big picture of the organization, or they don't have something on their radar right now, and so they kind of move it on. So I encourage you to aim high when you're reaching out to direct contacts. And again, this is I've got some Sandler books from Sandler Sales Training, and this is, by the way, exactly what they tell you in Sandler Sales Training. So we're all salesmen now. A job search is a sales job, and this really comes straight out of Sandler training of aiming high. The next type of people that we want to talk about is the executive recruiter. So these are the guys that are recruiting for mid to senior level positions. Typically, they are recruiting for positions at $150,000 and above. The difference between an executive recruiter and what's called they're called retained search, and my mind just went blank on the other kind of non-retained searches, is these guys typically have a specific job that they're searching for. They've been hired by the contract to fill that, and they have an exclusive contract to fill that job. In your non-retained searches, typically they are hiring for groups of people. So like, they might be hiring for project managers. They typically are not hiring for a specific role or a specific job. Typically, they kind of go up to about the 150 mark, is kind of what they will typically go to. Now, caveat, if this is truly a technical position, if this is truly, a software developer, software engineer, they might go up a little bit higher in salary, but still they're really looking for sort of a class of job, as opposed to the retained search and the executive recruiters that are really looking for a specific person. So again, you can go to bizjournals.com for your city, and it will tell you, here's the 5 to 10 executive search firms in your area. And so I would recommend that you reach out to those people. Now, in our little top of mind awareness here, you really don't need to send them an introduction letter. You really don't need to make a phone call. So these guys are keyed to getting, resumes and pain letters on a regular basis. So you can hit them straight with a pain letter and a resume, follow that up with an email, follow that up with a LinkedIn. That's still 3 touch points to these guys. Most of them are going to be, they're going to be nice to you. They'll say hi. They might even call you on the phone. But they do tend to run hot or cold. I mean, either they're looking for a specific job that you're qualified, in which case they're going to jump and they're going to run very, very quickly. Or, if they're not, again, they'll be nice to you, but they are not going to help you find a job. Remember, recruiters work for the companies. The companies are the ones that hire you. They find people for jobs. They do not find jobs for people. So again, they're going to be super nice to you, but be aware that their job is not to help you. Their job is to help the company find people for specific positions. When you do talk to them, you're probably going to want to target their partner or consultant. Those are typically the customer-facing people, the client-facing people, if you will, that are working directly with those clients. Ironically, the recruiter title in an executive recruiter is typically more of a junior role. It's typically someone that's looking at hundreds of LinkedIn resumes and is much more tactical than strategic. So target the partner or consultant of the firm. Usually there's just a handful at each firm. Very similar, private equity firms. So, these are firms that typically have a portfolio of privately held companies. And the companies will typically be related to each other. The private equity firms usually kind of have a 3 to 5 year window that they're looking at. So all they care about is results. Results matter. They only want proven leaders. So, I once talked to a private equity guy, and I was like, hey, I was doing some coaching, some leadership development, and I was trying to pitch him on, letting me come in and do leadership development for his leaders. And he just looked at me and laughed. He's like, John, if like my guys are only going to be here for 3 to 5 years, like they're already proven leaders. They already have a team, and I'm not going to develop leaders. And so by the same token, these are not the kinds of people that you want to overreach your skills and your capabilities. They will sniff out inflated resumes very, very quickly. But if you are a mid to senior level person and you have that kind of experience, again, bizjournals.com, the A to Z database will typically find who the private equity firms are in the metropolitan area. Very easy to identify those firms. Do your homework. What are the companies that are in their portfolio? Because you may want to hit the private equity firm and the company. So again, these will typically have, multiple companies, and depending on where you hit them, they may be involved in the day-to-day operations of the company, or they're not. So this is a great way also to kind of find companies that are, small privately held companies, but have some private equity behind them. If you guys are, I know I've done the, will work for food and opportunity, but eventually I've got 7 kids, and, eventually my wife wants me to actually get paid. And, that equity stake is great, but that equity stake does not taste nearly as good as the Outback Steakhouse. And unfortunately, Outback requires me to pay them in cash, not in stock options. So, when you go to the private equity firms, that there's at least some money that's backing the company. And so they can actually typically pay you. Very similar in terms of the top of mind awareness. You don't need to do an introduction letter. You don't need to call them on the phone. They're very much keyed to knowing exactly what they're looking for. And if you, kind of resonate with that pain, they'll jump all over you and help you. They're nice people. I don't think that they're nearly as, they're not going to be nearly as friendly as the executive recruiters. If you don't look interesting to them, they'll ignore you and ghost you, but that's okay. You've still kind of touched them 3 or 4 times, so it's okay to do that. So what should your expected results look like? So if you've kind of gone through this process and you have identified 40 to 60 targeted contacts, so this is direct contacts at specific companies, this is your targeted executive recruiters, your private equity guys, you've gone after them, you've identified that 40 to 60 people, you've then kind of touched them in this top of mind awareness 3 to 5 times. What you should get is you should get 4 to 6 conversations out of this. And this is really where it kind of goes to that first slide. How long should this job search last? You should be able to kind of go through this process about every 30 days. So again, kind of identify your companies, start sending those emails, having those touches, having those conversations. And if you're not getting the 4 to 6 conversations, then really there's one of a handful of things that have gone wrong. Either one, your pain is just not resonating. Okay, the pain that you are leading with is just not resonating with those people. They just don't care. Okay. Number 2, you don't appear credible. So again, if you're fresh out of college and you're trying to be the CEO of a publicly traded company, it's going to be that might. I'm all for reaching high and aiming high, but if you're that far out of line, they're you're not going to appear credible. So as much as I want you to reach high, you don't want to go so far that you just don't appear credible. Or the third thing is you're just talking to the wrong person. So in larger organizations, and I'll go back to Dell, you may have to kind of try a few different types of people within that organization to kind of get the right person. The beauty of this process and this system, it's extremely repeatable. If you're not getting these results, it really is kind of one of those three things. Just adjust it, send it again. Maybe even send it to the same people. In some cases you might, and you've kind of clarified your pain statement. Hey, don't be afraid of that. It's okay. But in most cases, you're going to find, okay, I need this is what my why looks like. This is what my organization needs to look like, my type of organization. And then really, this is what you're looking for. You're looking for 4 to 6 conversations, because ultimately, the purpose of all of this is to have that conversation with a senior decision maker. And then from there, to get into the details of either a job hire, or again, this is no different if you were doing a consulting gig. This is exactly what your consulting marketing would probably look like, and you're just going into a consulting engagement conversation instead of a hiring conversation. But by that, you should get at least one, and I can say that oftentimes multiple job offer or consulting engagements out of this process. So that's kind of all about networking and how to kind of reach out to people and the different types of people. So I'm going to kind of open it up for any questions, thoughts, and snide remarks.
I've got a question for you. I've started kind of tracking things that look interesting and, kind of classifying as either a job prospect or a consulting prospect. And a lot of times it could be either way, right? Mm-hmm. What would you lead with? Would you lead with the consulting aspect of it or the job aspect of it? Or, sometimes you can filter out a conversation and you get to talk to them directly, but.
That's actually a really good question. To some extent, I would probably really just lead with the pain, okay, and be a bit nebulous on, am I looking for a job? Sort of be a bit nebulous on that and try to get that conversation. That sort of, I'm gonna give you lots of different options here. I wouldn't necessarily, don't be too. Here's what I'd say. Keep your focus on the pain and can you solve the pain? If anything, be nebulous on, are you looking for a job or are you looking for a consulting? You can kind of leave that a little bit murky. Now, maybe if you look at this company, and you can tell they're a smaller deal, and you have a lot of consulting, you might kind of bring in that if it really looks like that's, your mileage may vary on a case-by-case basis. I would say, if in doubt, if it was me and you really weren't looking for the next job, I would probably lead consulting if it was me, because that's how I probably, that really is more likely my honest, next game in things. So I would probably tend to go with that. If you really are more in a situation where, I really am looking for another job. And again, especially, been out of work for a while, things are tight, that kind of stuff. And it's like, okay, because look, I'm going to make, if anyone has done any kind of consulting or entrepreneurial work, it is not for the weak of heart. Okay. I mean, there is a lot to be said about a steady paycheck and a job. Depending on what day you ask me, I've either told my kids to tie me down or put a bullet in my head if I say I'm going to do another startup. So right now I'm just at the tie me down phase, but a couple of weeks ago, I was at the put a bullet in my head if I do another startup. So your mileage may vary. What is it that you really want? Focus on the pain. Focus on the pain. Good question.
One thing, kind of another question on the pain. So, I've run startups and come into leadership roles in startups and so forth. And in startups, you do many things. And leading with a single pain has been difficult for me just because I deal with the pain that exists from time to time. You roll with that. So how important is it to kind of lead with a single pain versus maybe a series of pains?
Well, I think that there's probably some categories of pains. Okay. So, for example, I'm kind of an operations guy. And so my series of pains are really all going to be around operations. Other people are really, turnaround, focus kind of people. And so, they're going to fall into the bucket of turnarounds. And I know you might say that a turnaround guy really needs to have some operational expertise because it's really an operational problem. But my guess is that there probably is a relatively small bucket of categories. So I would kind of think, what would that category look like? Is it turnaround? Is it operational excellence? Is it scaling? Think through that. And again, if you're the kind of person that's done all, you might look at that company, right? So if that company, let's say that company, you look and you say, well, they just got $20 million in private equity. So they've got a solid product. Most likely it's a scaling, right? If they just got private equity fund, they probably are now, how do I scale and turn that on? So I would lead with that. I'm just to continue with the private equity. If they haven't gotten PE firm and you have some experience of fundraising, you might lead with that pain. So again, on the tactical sense, there's probably a lot of overlap tactically on your skill sets. But I would, I think the exercise that's worth doing is putting yourself in that CEO or whoever's chair and just sort of think, what is it that's keeping them awake at night? And in fact, by the way, that's actually a question that I love doing in interviews and other things, is what keeps you up at night? Okay. And in fact, the podcast that I do, that's always kind of the question that I ask on my podcast. And I say, what keeps you up at night? Either you're so excited that you just can't sleep at night because, you just ready for this to take off, or, this is the coming apocalypse and, this is going to kill you and you can't sleep at night because, the four horsemen of the apocalypse are knocking at your door. But if you ask that question, it's a great way to get them talking about, what's keeping them at night. And by the way, that also gives you a little bit of an insight into what their personality is. Are they kind of and I'm not, don't take this and I'm not being critical, but some people are more motivated by fear and some people are more motivated by reward. And so that kind of gives you a little bit of an insight into how that person is likely motivated from a personality perspective, how they answer that question.
Hey, John, can I add a thought for that too?
Absolutely.
I think on the original question, Scott, I love everything John said. It's really spot on. But I think if you were to ask, another place that it depends on is the size of the company you're going for, right? If you're going for someplace like, a big giant corporation like Dell, it's going to be a more specialized pain because the bigger companies get, the more specialized roles get. So they're going to be looking for, something that it doesn't have as much of a wide area. So, you've been in all these startups, you have a lot of different things to pull from. You can group those things together in a package for something smaller and talk higher up and wider and more categorized, like John was saying. And however, if you're going into something that's a bigger company, you can get to a heart of a specialty that you really want to focus on because they're going to look at it more like that in a place like that. You're not going to have that breadth of control.
That's a good point.
Except at the various highest levels, right? And even there, that's really about like leadership and not really all the specialties down below. So just kind of factor in your audience in that way as well.
That's a good call. I mean, what keeps you up at night? That's a common question I use if you're talking to them, right? Getting to them is kind of the point here. But I think these are some good points, and Todd, what you just mentioned, that definitely makes sense. Because I mean, big companies are new to me. I mean, I've worked with startups for 25 years with going back to school for a while in between there. So it's a new world for me.
It's all, spans and layers at companies like that, right? It's just much more specialized. Everything gets more specialized the bigger you get.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and just I would say as a general rule with the bigger companies, how you kind of handle those cross organizational functions, and leadership, leading up, leading down, becomes like really, really important at the larger companies.
And it could also become like, if the particular kind of role you're taking, I mean, there's sort of formal leadership, but there's a tremendous amount of cross-functional leadership where, you might own part of the team, but you're really working cross-functionally with a lot of other teams. Mm-hmm. And so you don't necessarily always control it the way you do, say, in a smaller company, right? You have maybe some aspect that you control, but then something else that's about how much you work with other large parts of the organization cross-functionally that you don't completely control. Right.
Good points.
Michael,
Anyone else?
Stephen, what about you guys? Any questions for John? Thanks for joining, by the way, both of you, and welcome. Y'all are free to come off mute if you want to ask a question.
I see Michael. Michael, one of the questions we sort of asked beforehand, if you don't mind me asking, but this was sort of the first question, is kind of where are you in this? Where are you in the search? Are you on an active search, recently laid off? So what's your story, Michael?
Well, I appreciate being a part of this. I apologize for being late to the party. I was following on Facebook a little bit and trying to keep up and get dinner made and all that stuff. But anyways, I switched careers about a year and a half ago. I did 25 years of youth and family ministry in the church and got really burned out. And so I didn't want to give up serving people. So I took on my own company and trying to be a coach. And so I'm trying to figure out how to be a marketer, how to do all these things without having the umbrella of theology or a staff or any kind of routine or structure around me. It's all on my shoulders. And so I'm at this point, after COVID and all these things, it's paralysis by overanalysis, because there's so many things I could do and should do and ought to do, but I have no idea where to start. So I keep trying to be my authentic self and reach out via LinkedIn or just make contact wherever I'm at, just to see where people are at. So when you talk about, just putting yourself out there, I've written emails and had conversations with people at different places. I never thought I would talk to CEOs or startup people or anything else that weren't on a church council, Yeah. And so just to be organic like this it's scary, but it's really cool to make connections with men and women I never thought possible. But I still am trying to actually be a coach and actually have clientele and do workshops or do any kind of teaching. So I'm trying to earn income from any and every feasible hustle I can find right now. So
Let me do a little bit of deep dive, if you don't mind. Thank you for sharing. And the reason is, I don't know if you saw this, but this was kind of an example of a resume. Okay, so this was sort of a before and after resume. The other part of this that I think you'll find interesting is Sam had 20 years as a youth pastor. So all of his work was traditional professional ministry related pastors. And actually, when he and I first worked together, to some extent, he was like, hey, maybe I'll, he'd done like most pastors, done some graphic arts and put together some newsletters and that kind of stuff. Sure. And he was like, well, maybe I could, find a graphic design company and I could do stuff. And I said, Sam, I said, look, I said, you've got 20 years of leadership. I said, you have, you have led, teams to other countries. You have managed, as I recall, I think he'd actually gone through 3 different changes in senior pastors. So, he knew what organizational change. And so basically the only reason I kind of give this, and just, I'm giving this just to you as a way of thinking, it was 2 things. One, I totally was like, how do we capture what your calling has been in ministry? How do we capture that and not downgrade you to this tactical thing that was like, okay, yeah, you did that, but that's not really what you've been doing for 20 years. And yes, he did want to get out of professional ministry. I think that there was probably a financial reason for that and other stuff. Here's where he landed, and I think I can share this. He's now basically he's the communications director for, it's either the CE, I think he's the communications director for the COO at Dell. So basically he directly reports, or at least dotted line reports, to Dell COO, and he's responsible for the office of the CEO's internal communications to all of Dell. And when you actually look at that job spec and look at what God had been preparing him in ministry for 20 years, it was like, oh my gosh, you have been prepared for this very specific corporate executive job. And it was just, I'll just say he was very pleasantly surprised when he started thinking a little bit outside the box and, okay, how do I do this? So I would just encourage you, if that resonates with you or whatever, to really kind of think, okay, what have you been doing for the time in ministry? And I do think that ministry does, and by the way, I'm a preacher's kid, so I have nothing against ministers and ministry, but I do think that they have they are not known for their professional excellence. And when you move into the corporate world, positioning your ministry, I think that there are some things that you can do to highlight the level of excellence that you've done as a minister. So hopefully that means something to you. If not, it was just a random tirade for 3 minutes.
Well, let me hop into that too, if you don't mind. Yeah, Michael. So I think there's a couple things on that. Number one, I would say that, a lot of what I've learned by doing ministry, which I've never done really in a professional setting, like I've never been paid to do ministry, but I've taken tons and tons of, I've done lots and lots of ministry, and I've used almost all of that back in the corporate arena as well, as well as bringing some of my corporate stuff into that. And so I think that there's a lot that people don't realize. And one story I like to tell is my brother-in-law many years ago was a teacher. He was a coach at a school. It's a middle school. He was down in Del Valley in Austin. He lived up in Cedar Park. So imagine he drove from Cedar Park to Del Valley, and he was coaching. So he was doing things at night, and he was going to other schools and recruiting. And I mean, that's just a ridiculous drive. I mean, you might as well drive to Houston, right? And so it's just horrible. And so he was doing this for years. And I talked to him and his wife one day, and I said, he should consider applying at Dell. And she was like, he doesn't know anything about computers. And I was like, look, Dell is a city. It's the size of a city. Okay, it has every possible thing you would think of in a city. It has people that are doing facilities. It has training. It has HR. It said he's a teacher. He's recruiting, right? He's coaching. All of those things exist in multiple different kinds of jobs at Dell. And so a lot of times I think what happens is people get into they get into an area, they get into education, or the military is horrendous about this, right? They think that all they can do is come out and kill people. It's like, no, it's like the #1 leadership training organization in the world. Are you kidding me? And so, churches, and especially, you're forming, you're growing a team, you're dealing with different people, you're getting people in informal capacities to come together and actually make things happen, that's a tremendous amount of leadership skill, right? Informal leadership, driving informal leadership is harder than driving formal leadership, right? There's no money associated with it, right? So sometimes I think it's just about getting past the context you were doing it in and saying, what is the transferable skill?
Mhm.
Who else needs that transferable skill? And more than likely you've got tons of those. And so kind of doing like John's saying, like take that up and think about that at another level and then say, how can I apply that in a different context? It's the difference between function and field, right? You're in a field of religion and ministry, and there's another field that's this other type of company, but maybe has that same function.
Right.
And you've got all these skills to apply to that function. And so I don't know if that's helpful either, but those are a couple thoughts I have on that topic. So to share them with you.
Appreciate that. I when I knew I was destined to walk away from the church, I began my job search and I started researching what are some positions that I can cross over to. And of course, being here in Austin with all the startups and, people manager and HR and different things like that, I was reading all about it. Like I do this already, not in a 40-hour a week increments, but I do it, monthly, weekly, all those things. And I rewrote my resume countless times trying to find the keywords, and I just drove myself crazy, and finally I just gave up. And I don't want to work medial jobs anymore while I'm trying to build my coaching business. I'm trying to find I know my niche is transition and helping people get through things. I'm divorced. I career change. I have kids that are one kid in the Army, one kid in high school. So empty net, all those things. I have a lot to offer. I think, we all do. That's why we're here.
Right.
So it's just trying to figure out how to make that crossover from nonprofit religion to corporate, and those are like I mentioned, those are the men and women that I've served alongside on church councils who work at Dell, work at Apple, work at Seton, work at St. David's, work everywhere, but still not able to figure out what words or what techniques or whatever to jump from one to the other. So,
Are you really wanting to stay and have your own coaching business and grow as a coach? Is that what your goal is?
I want to thrive. I want to thrive, well, wherever that leads me. I love being a part of a team. So doing things on my own is not ideal, but I've definitely, the networks I'm creating and the people that do what I do or close to it, and it's not the same as was when I moved to Austin from Minneapolis, and I served a congregation of 5,000 people, and I was one of 4 full-time youth staff, and that was the ultimate. And you can't beat that. But I would love to work on a team to help people, to serve people, to keep people at their job and help them to be successful and of course be rewarded and paid handsomely for it. So
absolutely.
What type of coaching do you do, or are you looking to do?
Like I said, I label myself a transition coach. So I've worked with the young adults I used to serve that are just getting out of college, or maybe they had an English degree and now they're working at Dell, or they're working somewhere else, and they're just trying to figure out if what they're doing is good enough or fits who they are. And also working with people who have decided or had that gut feeling that it's time to make a career change, but I don't know how to do it. I don't know if I can. I don't have the guts to make that leap, and then just to help them, get through those tough times of maybe you're not going to have the income you had for a month or two, but you're definitely going to get right back into it. And sure enough, they have. And then with the pandemic happening, I haven't had any of those connections for a while. So, but and then of course people like me in their upper 40s, empty nesters who are trying to figure out what to do with retirement, or trying to figure out what to do with their next career and those kind of things. So when I was in ministry, there's a lot of men and women who transitioned from the corporate world to being pastors, and I helped a lot of them to make that transition too. So
Hey,
I'm gonna give you 2 resources that I give these to everyone. But number 1 is I would highly recommend. By the way, this is sort of like my default. You guys have heard this, but 48 Days to the Work You Love by Dan Miller. Absolutely must read. And it's also, it's not just sort of an intellectual, but it really is a very applicable, he talks about sort of the two stages of the job search. So the first is that internal. Who am I? What pain do I solve? How do I solve it? And then the external, okay, how do I go find the people that do that? And literally he has, day one, do this, day two, do this, day three, do that. And he also comes from a very faith-based perspective. He very much is a believer and an advocate to do what your calling is. The second thing that I would do is I would highly recommend that you go to the library or get a subscription of the Austin Business Journal and just get some of that intelligence, sort of that business intelligence of who's who, what are they doing, what's kind of the business climate in Austin. You can, I don't know if the libraries are open, but the magazine comes out weekly. And, if you go to the library and just get some, the back issues, and literally just kind of page through it, page by page, you'll find, one or two articles, per issue, but it will really kind of help you go, oh, I didn't know those guys were here in Austin. Oh, that's what they do. Right. And so you'll be able to kind of start getting that business intelligence very, very quickly.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
So
I see that there's an iPhone Steven. So as is my want to bring people online. If iPhone Steven, if you have any questions or comments or want to share where you are in this journey, now's your time. Or not.
I know he chatted with me. So I don't know if you just don't have an ability to come off speaker or whatever, but we happy to answer any of your questions or kind of help you from where you're at, Stephen, if you want to share some of that. If not, the other thing, and feel free to hop in, Stephen, we'll come back to you. But in the meantime, if there's other questions for either John or other conversations or things that you guys would like some help with at this point in time, I think we'll skip community breakouts because we're already kind of coming in towards the end of this, but we still have about 10 minutes. So is there anything else that you guys could use any help with at all on any topic?
Yeah, I'll throw one thing out there, and this kind of plays off of Jonathan, what you were just saying about the Austin Business Journal, and ties back to Scott, your question about having areas of expertise and having expertise in a lot of different areas. Not sure how do I narrow in on it. If one thing we used to do in the recruiting space when I worked for the agencies is that every Monday we would read the Austin Business Journal or the Orange County Business Journal or whatever city we were in. And we were looking for, as Jonathan was talking about, when he was talking about the gaining business knowledge, we would do that. We would look for those stories in articles of companies that were moving into the area, or companies that were reorganizing, or companies that were being acquired, or companies that were shutting down. These are all, if you think about what problem a company has that you're trying to solve or you've solved for before, just by reading the Austin Business Journal or any of these business journals, if you read into the article, you will hear the pain that they're struggling with. And if you've solved that pain before, for example, let's say that you are a startup guy, and you've helped navigate startups from growth to integration with another company that got acquired, and that was your thing. Well, just think about it. When any company that's talking about an acquisition or potentially being acquired, all of a sudden you have an area of expertise now that is directly going to impact that company. And if they are speaking of it, it doesn't necessarily they're doing it yet, but you can be there far. I've won clients by calling on them from an article and saying, hey, I heard you were moving to the area. What's your staffing plan look like when you move to that area? And just by having that dialogue and being open to discuss it, we want a client. So think about your area of expertise when you look at these articles in the Business Journal, and I'm sure you can create conversation at least. And those 4 to 6 contacts or meetings that Jonathan was talking about, if you think about building using the article, building your list, I guarantee you it will result in some conversations that you can have.
Excellent.
Michael, one thing I was thinking of, you mentioned that you're on some boards with, a bunch of people. That might be an inroad into finding new business or working, you have that relationship with them. They're probably, some of them may be high, powerful people. If they don't need it, they may know someone that does. And there's that. And one thing, kind of hearing from what you're saying, I don't know if this is appropriate or not, but some of the companies might be downsizing. They might be looking for resources for their employees that they know might have to go just due to COVID or whatever. That might be an area that you could excel at as well.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah.
No problem.
Hey, Michael, I'll throw one more thing out at you. Another great place to make contacts, and you're in it. You said that you were the pastor, or you were kind of for the youth pastor of churches.
Yeah.
Was that back in where you came from, or was that here in Austin?
I served 4 churches here in Austin in the last 8 years, or 7 years.
The reason I say that is one of the places that I spoke to when I did my previous presentation is one of the best places to make connections is kids' sporting activities or kids' events. Because if you know the kids, the likelihood if you made an influence in their lives, the parents know that you've made an influence in their eyes. And typically those parents are connected into companies somewhere. And if you want to speak to immediate testimonials or recommendations on LinkedIn, these are the folks that are already connected into companies in the local area. So if you think of it from an inside out perspective, here's the folks that I directly impacted within my network. And here's the people that are, raising those children. Those people are connected into other places amongst, and they're the ones that would refer you in, knowing that you're trying to get into the world. So this is when Jonathan was talking about, making the right connections. These are places, the friends and the families, you already have influenced plenty of families.
Yeah. 3 people just popped into my head when you mentioned that. So that's a great point.
That's a really, really good point, Kevin. That's awesome.
I told a story last week. There was one of my colleagues in the recruiting industry. She was trying to get to the CEO of a company for 2 years or so. And she kept prospecting and sending letters and stuff like that. And nothing really was working. She was trying to navigate the organizational chart. And 2 years of doing it, she got a letter from her husband, that they were doing a social event in the neighborhood that week. And she almost didn't attend because she was trying to figure out how to navigate the world to get to this CEO and continue down that path. Well, she showed up and decided to go. Guess who lived like 4 or 5 doors down the street? The CEO of the company.
Wow.
And they had lived in the same neighborhood for a couple of years, but because they were so busy all the time, they never connected. But he happened to show up at that social event. So again, we just look in our backyards and tell our story, and I guarantee you people will help you.
It's not what you know, it's who you know most of the time. Yeah, exactly.
Statistics say 80% of the jobs come from who you know, not what you know.
Right.
Yeah. Well, Jonathan Schober, so wrapping up here, kind of give us a summary, like what's the next step that everybody needs to take like immediately, like tomorrow. Like, what's the next step? And wrap us up with that. Give us your thoughts on that. And then,
All right.
if
All
you
right.
don't mind, you
I
can. You can
love
rant
I
out,
love you
too.
putting me on the spot, and so
Yes.
we're going to go ahead and do it. So here's what I want from each of you. Okay, so my email address is John at maximizeothers.com. John at maximizeothers.com. And here's what I want. I want in the next 24 hours, I want to see you guys. I want to know what your true north is. So complete this sentence for me. I solve X pain for Y kind of organizations by doing Z. And if you will send me that, I will give you 5 targeted companies to go reach out to.
I just added John's the email address that you just said to the chat session, so you can grab that.
There you go.
So
That'll be my bonus. Thank you, Todd, for putting me on the spot there.
Yeah, repeat that one more time.
All right. So,
Even when you repeat it, what's the ask again?
So once again, I want you to tell me what your true north is. The pain you solve. I solve X pain. The kind of organization you want to solve it for Y organization, what it is that you do by doing Z. I solve X pain for Y organizations by doing Z. Get that to me by 8 p.m. tomorrow evening, and I will give you 5 targeted companies and contacts that you should reach out to.
He's good at that too, guys. I'll tell you. I know it for a fact. So you should take him up on it.
Now I'm going to have to turn on my A to Z database link. I'm going to have to get that. I'm going to get that turned on. I'm going to go find my cache credentials in my browser for the Pflugerville library.
Well, you need it to anyway. So
that's right.
Good. Yeah. Well, do you want to do one more thing and pray us out, Mr. Schober?
Be honored. You bet. All right. Well, Father, I do thank you so much for just letting us kind of be here. Father God, Lord, you've designed each one of us with a special purpose and a calling. Lord, we are here to serve others, and that is manifest in all kinds of ways. Father, I am praying that you will help us to truly be wise and mature in our relationship with you, but also to be excellent in the way that we do the work that you've called us to do. So, Father, for everyone on this call and for anyone on Facebook, I do pray, Lord, that you bless them with wisdom on their next job search and just divine appointments. And I ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. This is Todd Boyum, and we hope you enjoyed this presentation of Fellowship Career Network. We meet every Monday evening from 6:30 to 8 p.m., and we hope you'll join us soon. To register and receive the Zoom link in your email, simply go to fellowshipcareernetwork.com today.